For those who don't know, our afternoon session is we have a fireside chat panel with the COO of N3TWORK, Dan Barnes, joined by Michael Walkning, the CRO of Singular. What's really interesting that really piqued our interest in terms of forming this fireside chat is that, for those who aren't aware in the industry, N3TWORK has always had a very unique approach as it relates to looking across their user acquisition strategy. And this differentiation really stems at the core, coming from the top down, in terms of how they hire, their hiring mentality, if you will. And ultimately how they're really able to create a culture when they can actually align their entire team across the board, across a single metric, ROI. So today, we're going to be discussing exactly how he was able to implement it, employ that from an operational standpoint, and specifically looking at how they are challenging the norms of marketing measurement. So with that, please join me in giving me a warm round of applause to Dan Barnes and Michael Walkning.
Good afternoon, everybody. I hope that you enjoyed the lunch as much as I did, and as much as you did. So this is a session called Disrupting the Norms of Mobile Measurement. It's a big, big title.
It's a pretty crap title, really.
We're going to try not to disrupt your digestion, actually. Everybody seems to be a little bit tired. But Dan, we've known each other for what now? 7 years?
Yeah.
8 years?
Yeah, something like that. 7 years?
Yeah, too long.
Too long.
Why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. So my name is Dan Barnes. I'm COO at N3TWORK. We're a full-stack gaming company. N3TWORK basically came out of NG Moco. We're acquired by DNA 2014, and then added in different pieces. Myself, I started at Machine Zone. I was a second UA manager at Machine Zone when they were still admired, went through the pivot to Machine Zone, and then joined Natural Motion. Part of the I was the first employee there, moved through Natural Motion, grew that team out. Part of the acquisition with Zynga, joined Zynga, stayed there for a year and a half, a couple of years during that acquisition period, and then I joined N3TWORK 2.5 years ago, so as COO.
Okay. When I do these kind of things, I always try to be a little bit controversial.
I feel like we need a translator with your accent and mine. Not sure anyone's going to understand what we're saying.
Those who do not understand me, please raise your hand. It's good. No, but I always try to be a little bit controversial, but you're my friend, so instead of talking about mobile measurement, why don't we talk about a World Cup? And do you think we're going to kick your ass? France? England?
No. No, we're going to win. We're obviously going to win.
You want to take a bet in front of everybody?
Every year we're going to win. So
I'll take a bet in front of everybody.
All right, $100.
Okay.
Deal.
Okay. All right.
That's a shoo-in. I mean, you sucked against Australia, so
wait and
that's
see.
An easy win.
Wait and see, my friend.
That was an easy bet.
Wait and see. You want to show them how you're walking today?
Yeah, I'm not representative of the English footballing nation. I played once. 3 minutes later, I popped my calf muscle, so I'm not representative of England in any way.
I'm going to let you go easy. Okay, so
I forgot I was a fat.
So let's go back to serious stuff. Why don't you tell us about your marketing organization? It's actually it's a very interesting way of building a marketing organization. Tell us what's different with N3TWORK.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing is we fucked up a lot in the past, and we've made a lot of mistakes. And so at Machine Zone, at Natural Motion, at Zynga, we made consistent and predictable mistakes. And a lot of that stemmed from either the silo of information, so the ability for CPI and LTV to communicate effectively, or alternatively, hiring the wrong people and the culture that empowers people to be able to kind of do their best work. And I think what we decided was, from the outset, we would try and solve those problems from the root causes rather than solve the symptoms later. So try and cure the disease, not the symptoms. And so what we did is the first thing is we set ourselves a challenge. So we said to ourselves, Neil and I said to ourselves 2.5 years ago that basically success in mobile gaming is going to come down to your risk aversion, how risk averse you are, the amount of cash that you have, and then your payback windows. And ultimately, they're the three things that are going to kind of like unlock growth and market share for you. And so what we said was, well, if you take all those things down to their most raw elements, then really it's just about the people that you hire. And so the first thing was, how do we hire the top 5 UA experts in the industry and bring them all to network? And when we first started down this route, it sounded insane, because how can anyone have enough oxygen to survive, to breathe in an industry? It's going to be a pissing match. People are going to fight over what they own and what they don't own. And so we had to create a culture that kind of empowered people to take ownership and have impact in specific areas. And so we had the culture, and then we went and got the people. So we hired Nebo. He's great. And so we brought him on board from Machine Zone. He's over there somewhere in the crowd.
Nebo, raise your hand.
There you are. Hi, Nebo.
Hey, you guys, he's a great UA manager if you want to hire him.
Yeah. Yeah, over my dead body. And then we hired Eric Seufert, who is equally, one of the industry leaders. And so we put Eric, Nebo, myself. I kind of loosely class myself in that group. But that means we still have 2 people to go, right?
Seufert, the guy who was insulting everybody a few minutes ago.
Yeah, that guy.
Seufert, show your head.
He's at the back as well. They're like,
yeah.
He'll be in the hot tub later if you want to.
Actually, I heard that to get him to sign up with you, you had to actually go into the hot tub with him. Is that right? Is that right?
Yeah, nearly. It was a cabana in Vegas and a swimming pool.
Yesterday I saw him also in the hot tub. He likes the hot tub.
Yeah, he does. He enjoys that sort of stuff. So. But we basically, hiring Eric was ridiculously difficult because he's one of the thought leaders in the industry, and so we had to convince him that the company was the right place, the culture was the right place, but also that he could have the impact that he wanted. He was running his own company, and so in order to do that was challenging at best. But I think British charm, Vegas, and...
I gotta tell you, I think it's the hot tub. That's what he told me.
Yeah, that's what he said?
Yeah.
All right, fair enough. So it was just the hot tub. He's actually quite cheap. And so...
It's British charm and inside the hot tub.
Inside the hot tub,
yeah.
Right, that's right. So I think that was the main focus for us, was like build a culture that allows people to be successful, and then ultimately hire the right people to be able to kind of like empower us to deploy capital. Because I think the thing that we have to do is build subjectively good games and objectively good businesses, right? We don't require hits. We certainly enjoy them when they happen, but we have a business in which the CPI is lower than the LTV, and we can religiously deploy capital against that. And so we don't. That's uninspiring, but that is the way we build objectively good businesses. And so in order to fully execute against that plan, you require cash, payback windows, and great people. And so that was kind of our thought process of how to execute the market.
And actually, what struck me, we know each other from Natural Motion, and we were discussing a lot when you joined Network. What struck me is how you and Neil obviously have thought about building the business from the get-go as a scaling business, from both a revenue and profitability standpoint. Can you share a little bit the thought process about that?
Yeah, I think Machine Zone is an incredible business and is incredibly focused on yield, right? On the maximizing the revenue generation of individual users, and so they have a load of tricks up their sleeve. They have a load of systems, and they have a deliberate game design that empowers all of those things. And so then I went to Natural Motion, and all they cared about was rendering water on a mobile device. And so there's a completely different end of the scale where you're saying, we don't care about money. Money will come. If you build it, they will come. And so how do you create something that is ultimately shareable, liked, and desired by hundreds of millions of people, and then the money will come later? And so they were at 2 ends of the spectrum. And when I spoke to Neil, my reaction to what he was saying was, their spot in the middle. Network, the aim that we have is basically to be able to build great games, but that actually will always generate LTV and revenue. And so, that felt like I'd done all the learning on one side, I'd done all the learning on the other side, and I had an opportunity to put those 2 things into play. And then the other part of that was, UA managers always argue with product managers about the quality of their live ops operations. And live operations are always complaining about the incent traffic that people are driving that's plumbing their attention. And so you would always have this to and fro between game side and user acquisition side in all of the companies I've worked at previously. And one of the aims here was to unite that CPI and the LTV under one umbrella. So there's no differentiation. So for example, Nebo has impact on the onboarding packs that people buy in the RFM model we have. So we have, we have the ability to do differential pricing, algorithmic distributed content, remote reconfiguration of the software, all of the things that you need to make a high LTV game. And Nebo has impact on what we sell to which person, how they come into the game, and how they act. And so that's really important for him to understand because that results in his ROI. And then the flip side is the games team are not only responsible for marketing in the game, they also come up with concepts for user acquisition. And they'll also kind of like be informed on all of the strategies that the UA managers are executing on. And so there's no gap in context for the two sides. And so that allows everyone to pull behind the same weight, which is ultimately ROI, right? I find all of these conversations really interesting because the focus on things like fraud and where do you spend your dollars most effectively, all of those things all bake down to ROI. You have to define when you want to be successful, and then you have to go and execute against that. And I think that gets lost sometimes. It's like finance, where financial people love making acronyms and making things seem more complicated than they actually are. I think the beauty of UA is it's not rocket science. If it works, you do more of it. If it doesn't work, you switch it off. And so and that's the same on an LTV side. You deploy content. If it works, you have to have success criteria. And if it works, then you increase the LTV. If it doesn't, you stop it. You move on to something else. And it's actually the ideas and the quality of people that are the metric for your success. And so, I thought everything we do is centered around LTV and CPI being the same fundamental thought process.
It doesn't sound like rocket science, but I think, and I know you just said it, but I think it has deep implication from an organizational standpoint. This focus on ROI, do you credit it to be really the force that really aligned your product and marketing teams together?
Yeah, I think so. I think leadership is repetition. And so that's a comment by Bing Gordon, by the way. But anyway, and so I just think you have to be ruthless about the things that are success criteria, and then you have to go after them, religiously. And so we talk about ROI in product meetings, which never happened to me before. They would be talking about retention or ARPDAU or conversion to payer or any of these other metrics.
That's liberating.
But they weren't talking about the ROI, and so you could be inflecting on campaigns or on specific segments of the user base that actually just cost too much in the first place, and you're kind of like fighting a losing battle. And so it was important to bring that into play and to make sure that we focused on it as much as possible.
Oh, that's great. Well, so focus on ROI at the end of the day.
Yeah, and also define, one of the questions that Bing asks, or Bing's on our board, he's on the board of Amazon as well, and one of the things he talks about all the time is define the metrics that nobody else has defined. And so, that's an important concept to think about, which is what are the aspects to your business that you disproportionately focus on that allow you ultimately or make you ultimately more likely to be successful. And so for us, one of the decisions we made were we're not going to focus on everybody. We're going to focus on payers. And so when I joined the company, we were talking about ARPDAU and retention. And now today, I don't even know what those numbers are in our company. All I know is the average revenue per monetizing DAU. So we class people as people who have converted and then played the game today. And then all I know is the ROI, the ARPMDAU, and the MDAU, which is like our daily paying players, right? And the hypothesis is if we can keep growing MDAU, revenue has to follow. It has to be correlated in some way. And then the only variance is the transaction size and the transaction frequency, which is like how often do they play and pay, and then how much do they pay when they do. And so we decided right from the outset to say ROI is king, CPI and LTV are the same thing, and we are going to disproportionately focus on monetized users. And so they were kind of like our guiding principles, and we've stayed very close to that for the whole, and it's worked, right? I mean, we put money in, and more money comes out the back. So
absolutely. So let's get a little bit more into the sausage making here.
It's a horrible image coming from you.
It's okay. I'm French. I'm French. I'll get
an
pass on
andouille?
them.
Is that the?
So listen, tell me how your architecture has. How did you think about your architecture to make all this possible? Do you think your architecture made it possible first?
Yeah, I mean, you can have great people, you can have a North Star, you can have guiding principles, you can have success criteria. Ultimately, if you don't have the data to empower those people to make decisions autonomously, then you're always going to fail,
I have a
right?
slide.
Yeah, you have to press the other button. Is the other? That's right. There's only
Sorry.
two buttons. There's only
it's the first time that I used something like that.
There's only two buttons, dude. You had a 50-50 chance.
It's too much for me already.
So I think you can't not have the data to empower those people to make the right decisions. And so we have a culture of like, so when we launched Legendary, August 2016, we asked the analysts, so we have our own internal data structure, but all of the attribution is driven by Singular. And so what we said was we want real-time revenue information. So we have zero latency on data. It's about 5 minutes aggregation up to the core tables. But then we have an hourly revenue email that comes out every single hour, 24 hours a day. And we did that at the launch of Legendary 2016. And the analyst was like, you are fucking insane. There is no way that you're going to keep this thing on. Like, this is too much information. And it's been on ever since. I still get them today. And what it has done is, and we send that to the whole company. So everybody has access to our hourly revenue numbers and our hourly monetized DAU numbers. And so what that means is everyone's incentivized behind the same thing. And then what we did is we ported that, and we ported that over to ROI. And we said, we need day zero intraday ROI. And some people would say, it's too granular, you can't make decisions, you flip-flop. But actually, because the humans are great that work, they identify trends very quickly. And so what that allows you to do is ultimately just be 10 times more reactive than somebody else. And so we don't necessarily use that to make deliberate decisions, but we use it to identify trends which drive the decisions, which drive the ability to kind of change course. And so we have a level of data and granularity and a level of context across the company which is higher than I've ever seen anywhere else. And that's also a deliberate choice, right? We made that decision. And so without attribution, you wouldn't know, the beauty of that is, so there's a few things. One, it's great because you can make timely decisions, but also without having the attribution and the cost in one place, you can't do that. It's not possible to do that. And so when you told me, whenever it was, that you guys were kind of like coming together under one roof with Singular, my only feedback to you was, sounds great, don't fuck it up, right? I mean, like that was
Did we fuck up?
Not yet.
Not yet?
So I think, the having cost and attribution in one place is fundamental to us executing, right? Because it dictates where we distribute the portfolio of revenue that we have. And that revenue gets reinvested in user acquisition. And so, we don't grow the business through UA or virality or social. We don't give a shit about K-factor. None of those things exist. We just deploy capital in places that are profitable against a payback window we define. And we can't do that without that, right?
Actually, I think it's refreshing that finally we get to the point of...
I mentioned you guys?
No, return on capital, making sure we make money. Anyway, so listen, we don't have too much time. I didn't understand a thing about what he said, but if you guys did, and if you have any question, please. Any question from the audience? Come on. The guy who asked, or the girl who asked the best question can have a hot tub session with Sufer today.
50. I'm gonna opt out from the hot tub session, but
I was gonna say 50 of your $100 that you don't get.
What do you see when you're looking for expert UA managers? What are those qualities?
Yeah, I think so. Good UA people normally have kind of like 3 characteristics. So they need to be analytical. Right? First and foremost, they have to understand data and be able to action on it. But the problem with analytical people in general, this is a general statement, is that they're hugely introverted and not very creative. And so you can't, lots of people can't come up with new ideas or new concepts or new campaigns. But the flip side is the same. If you have somebody that's overly creative, most of those people hate data. And so they will not be able to focus on the things that are telling them, the signals that tell them whether they're doing a good job or not. And then, so I think ultimately you need both. You need somebody who is creative and analytical, and those people are hyper rare. I mean, in the UK, we say rare as rocking horse shit. Like, they are the rarest type of people. And so I think those two things are very important, and that makes up 90% of those people. You need some good balance between being an analyst and being creative. But then ultimately, they have to be able to build the bridge to why the thing that they're doing is important. And so they have to understand the business KPIs. They have to understand the general trajectory. They have to understand the implementation. They have to understand why what they're doing matters. And so they need to be business smart, creative, and analytical. And those people are quite rare, right? There's not very many of them. And so they're the people that I would go after. And it doesn't matter how young they are or how old they are or what previous job they've been doing. Find that those characteristics are more important than any kind of level of experience that somebody has had, especially because the market moves so fast. The thing that you knew yesterday is probably not correct today. And so sometimes it's just better to not have to deconstruct someone and reconstruct them, but rather just get in at the base. We hire a lot of people, a lot of grads out of school, but they have to have those character traits.
Not a very helpful answer, huh? It's like that guy doesn't exist. I don't know.
He does exist. I mean, there's loads of them in this room. It's like, there's a lot of people in here that have all of those traits, right?
Hey, try to hire here. There are a lot of good people here. It's probably the most practical.
Suf and Nebo are out.
The most practical advice I can give you. I'm telling you. All right.
I mean, we have. We talk a lot. Like all of the people that ultimately control the spend in the industry. And there's a lot of them. There's a lot of great people, right? I mean, I see Andy and Brian, and there's Clarissa around. And like, there's a load of great people just sat in this room that have all of those kind of traits. And so, I just wish Nebo had them. Otherwise,
poor Nebo. Any other question? Come on, hot tub, guys. Gary? Can we give a mic to Gary? Or here? Gary, you go after.
Yeah, you talked a little bit about the payback window and how important that is for you guys, but at the end of the day, ROI is kind of is king. Can you talk a little bit about the trade-off between those two things of sort of fast payback versus overall payback?
I mean, in an ideal world, I don't think there shouldn't be a trade-off. I think you should, if you have a predictable revenue stream, you understand content delivery on a live operations standpoint, you should be able to grow LTV kind of systematically. And then if you can do that, then it's all about being able to determine where to spend the best dollar possible. We will spend we don't have budgets. We don't have monthly budgets. They don't exist. We will spend the most amount of money humanly possible within our ROI constraints. And so sometimes that means we spend less because Facebook mess up their algorithm on April the 12th, or whatever other kind of set of things happen that kind of limit our ability to deploy capital. And so we will react to those things in real time, but ultimately we don't have an upwards cap. If we could spend, I think we spend somewhere between $4 and $8 million a month. If we could spend double that, we would. There is no short to long-term LTV. I think we just distribute the capital that makes sense. And part of that is being able to forecast LTV accurately, right? And then understand and rely on those things. And so, for example, we use cancer growth curves in order to predict our LTV because we found that's the best way for us to fit to a curve. Because if you think of it, it grows quite quickly, it slows in the middle, and then it kind of like tapers off towards the end. And so that's the way that our LTV grows. And so we used those models to be able to forecast accurately. And so I think if you can forecast your LTV accurately, there shouldn't be that trade-off, ideally. I mean, it's not always that simple. But.
Gary?
Yeah. Hello? Okay. My question is, I have this crazy echo. My question is, how much is, over the next few years, how much will technology be a key part of your role? Meaning not just vetting out technology, but I've seen some of the stuff you guys do, and you actually build stuff in-house, and you're super modern. Is there going to come a point in time where leading a growth team or a user acquisition team, you'll literally hire engineers, or is it mostly, are you waiting for outside vendors to kind of push that stuff? How do you see that?
I think we're already there. I think, in my opinion, we crossed that threshold the moment that these walled gardens started to take predominant share of impressions, and then on top of that, the DSPs became so fraudulent that you couldn't effectively deploy capital. And so I think humans aren't very good at detecting those things, and so you can't rely on a human to do that. You know, we have a load of, you should talk to Eric about this, but like we are deliberately solving those problems. So we are, we're going to the exchanges directly. We're building our own ability to do that, as you guys well know, because you're empowering us to do that. But so we are doing that. Creative, we solve programmatically. Bidding, we solve programmatically. LTV, we solve programmatically. So everything, ideally, is now just a human having an idea. We're not there yet, to be clear. I mean, I think we're probably, I don't know, Eric would tell you, but we're probably 5% to 10% of the way on that journey that we want to take. But Eric would say 20, just because he's happy with where he is. But I think everything will be programmatic in the next X amount of time, and that includes things like creative. I mean, you should be able to dynamically stitch together creative in a way that creates multiple variables, so that you can decrease the cost of acquisition by like mitigating decay, right? In your creative, you should be able to do that. If you can't do that, you're going to lose at some point. And so, I think we're not there again, to be clear, but I think we have the right approach to the way that things are going, which is basically all programmatic with humans being a catalyst to the baseline. So I would see humans as being inflective instead of optimizations. And so the optimizations should just come algorithmically, I think.
Well, thank you. Unfortunately, we're going to be out of time. Dan, thank you very much for your support, for sharing
you're welcome.
All this great experience with the audience. I hope you guys find it enjoyable. I surely didn't. And have a great afternoon.